Hi guys, welcome to the channel. So today we're both here together and we're deciding to talk about our pregnancy after infertility and kind of walk you guys through our pregnancy and share the good, the bad, some, the scary, just walk you through our pregnancy journey. Like last week and maybe 2 weeks ago we filmed our infertility videos, and so we thought that since we're kind of going back in time with you guys, we'd start off where that left off, and where that left off was, I think both of us ended it with finding out we were pregnant. And so now we're going to talk about finding out we were pregnant after infertility and our pregnancy journey with our little baby here, Anna. So
it's a nice little look back and to see how, you know, what we reflected on and, you know, how we really felt during those times. So I think it's good to talk about.
She's eating your tie.
Yeah, I need that.
Not eating that.
Okay.
That's not good. No.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we both ended our fertility journey video the same way. We're finding out we were pregnant. If you haven't watched that, I'll link both of them in the description box. But basically, I'll give a little brief, like how we found out. So after 3 years of struggling to conceive, we were, exactly. So when we found out we were pregnant, we were actually going through the adoption process. And so the day before we found out we were pregnant, we went through a failed match where a birth mom that seemed like she was going to choose us decided to go with another family for her intended child. And so we were like a little bit down, kind of dealing with the emotions of that, and we decided to go out and get our minds off things, and we decided to go to lunch and kind of just walk around and have a little date, just the two of us. I'm trying to eat your feet. So we decided to have a little date and just kind of enjoy each other and just heal from that. And so we went out that day and we enjoyed the day. And then when I got home, I decided to take a pregnancy test. Sam didn't know about it. Honestly, I still to this day don't really know why I took that pregnancy test. I just saw it in our bathroom, decided to take it. I really didn't think it would come out positive. Like, I was so used to our test coming out negative. I really still to this day don't know why I took that test. Like, I don't know, it was like I saw it and something like a little voice was telling me to take it, but it wasn't because I thought it was positive. I really don't. It was such a weird experience. I really don't understand it to this day. But I remember that I came home and I saw it in the bathroom, and something in my head was like, oh, just take the test. And I remember, I think there was 2 reasons why maybe it was a little voice in my head, which was when we went out to lunch that day, I had ordered a drink, and then I remembered, I ordered the drink and then I literally didn't drink it. And I remember one of my friends talking about that when she was pregnant. Like, she went out on vacation and every time she would order a drink, she wouldn't even drink it because she just had this like weird feeling. And then she ended up being pregnant. But I didn't really think I was pregnant. I just took the random test. But I remember coming home and taking it, not wanting to tell him because I'm like, well, it's gonna come out negative again. I don't even know why I'm taking this. And just randomly taking it. And I went to the bathroom and took the test. And I remember he said he had to use the bathroom. Like, I think you knocked on the door.
Yeah.
Or something. And so he said he had to use the bathroom. And so I'm like, oh no, he's gonna see the test. And then he's gonna be like, why'd you take the test? And it's gonna be a whole thing. So I hid it behind a plant that we have in our bathroom. But I remember even like I had just taken it maybe a few seconds before, and even when I went to hide it, I saw like a second line, but it was really faint, and I was in my head like, that's not whatever. So I hid it, and he went to the bathroom, and then I went back into the bathroom and I checked the test again, and it had already been like the time, and I checked the test again, and by then that faint line that I didn't believe was like really dark. And I was like, I still didn't believe it. I have never to this day had more of a like moment in your life where something is so hard to believe or like kind of outer body than that. So I didn't believe it. I was in complete denial after so many years of infertility, after going through the adoption process, you know, putting our faith in that we were going to adopt a child, thinking that, you know, pregnancy wasn't going to happen for us, accepting that all that we had been through, like seeing that test, I didn't automatically, like it just didn't register. So it didn't register at first. So I took another one and the same thing happened. It came out really dark, positive, and I was just in the bathroom really confused for a couple of minutes and just kind of staring at the test and, like I said, in disbelief. And you didn't even know I was taking it.
It was really hard to wrap my head around it.
Well, I didn't even show you yet.
Yeah,
at that point.
Because I was just kind of taking care of like some of the things, like getting undressed, getting ready to be comfortable, because after that whole day of shopping and things like that, we were just like, okay.
Well, no, I'm talking about before. But then so ultimately when I figured it out, the tests were were positive, and I was shocked, and I was like shaking and crying, and I was happy, but my brain just didn't register after everything we've been through. Like, it just couldn't register. It was like something unbelievable at that point in our journey. And so I brought the test to him and I showed him, you know, we did celebrate, we cried together, but I still in my head was like, this can't be real. So Sam went out and he bought more tests and digital, and like people know it's kind of,
it's like what you see in like those movies. Like, you get the first test, you see it's positive, like you just like, oh wait, you know, let me double check. So I literally threw my clothes all back on and ran downstairs to the nearest Rite Aid and grabbed a bunch of them off the shelf. Actually, no, I went to the Rite Aid, and that's the day all the pregnancy tests were gone. Yeah. There were no pregnancy tests. Everybody decided, oh, let me check a pregnancy.
I know.
So I had to go another 10, 15 minutes on foot to the other pharmacy where they had plenty.
Yeah. So, and then we bought a digital and we bought another one, and the other one came out positive as well, and the digital said pregnant. And I mean, honestly, it is like, well, all the pregnancy tests, home pregnancy tests, are pretty accurate, but something about seeing the word pregnant kind of helps you like click in your brain. But it was really hard after everything we've been through. So I remember when Sam went to go buy the other pregnancy test, it was like I was having a denial, outer body, like this can't be true. And after everything we've been through, it was like you're almost scared to get your hopes up, like, is this wrong? So it kind of like was one of those moments. I never really thought that we would tell other people right away or whatever, but in that moment I was in such disbelief. I needed to it's like one of those moments where you're like, something happens and you're like, am I dreaming? Someone needs to pinch me, right? So I needed someone else to pinch me, and so I called my best friend, and luckily she picked up the phone. She was traveling, but she still picked up in that moment. And I called her, and while he was picking up the test, I was there like, oh my God, I have to tell you something. And I ended up telling her. She's the only one we told so early. I just needed like someone else to tell me that this was actually real. And I sent her the pictures, and she's like, yeah, I see the lines, like, yeah. And I still didn't believe it. I was like, no, I'll call you when I go to the doctor. Like, this is crazy. So, and she was like, no, you could believe it. Like, you know, it's good. It's a blessing. And I was just like, it is a blessing, but I was in complete disbelief. It was like, I don't know, like, after everything we've been through, I think it was like, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And so Sam comes back with the test. We took it. It was positive. And we did celebrate, but we were like, okay, let's go confirm with a doctor. And so the next day we went and we confirmed at the urgent care. We just went and asked for a pregnancy confirmation, and we told them everything. We told them that we struggled for 3 years. We told them, you know, that I was in disbelief, and because you know, they took some history, and we explained everything, and they ran a pregnancy test, and it was positive, and they confirmed that I was pregnant. And so yeah, it's really hard in the beginning, because even though they'll confirm a pregnancy for you, and they can't really do an ultrasound. You don't get a first appointment for a while. And with everything we went through, that's kind of it's anxiety inducing in general when you get pregnant, especially your first baby. But with everything we've been through, like, the anxiety was worse. And so I asked for an HCG level test, which is where they can test and make sure, it's not 100%, I don't think, but like they can test and basically make sure that you have the amount of HCG in your blood corresponding with the amount of weeks that you are pregnant, and that is an indicator that the pregnancy is healthy, and that is an indicator that you are at low risk for like a miscarriage.
And if those of you who may not know, that's essentially, it's a blood test to make sure that the hormone levels are appropriate.
Right, and if they do that, so that's normally what they do if somebody has like history of infertility or pregnancy loss and things like that. They'll run it and they'll tell you basically if it comes back low, they'll kind of tell you that either you are at high risk for a miscarriage. There's different reasons why they do it. Normally the doctor requests it if they see something, but you can also request it just for peace of mind, just to know more about your own pregnancy. And that's what I did. I told them, you know, that we had been struggling for 3 years, and that I was anxious about it, and that I thought it would put my mind at ease. And they ran the blood, and it did take a whole day, so we did have to wait for it.
So much like the pregnancy test, where you wait like those 4 minutes or those 3 minutes, and it's just the longest 3 or 4 minutes of your life. Sometimes with this, especially with this HCG test, it was like the longest. It felt like a really long 24 hours.
Yeah, but we were like in celebratory mode, and back then we were in our bubble. We weren't telling anybody yet, and so we were the only ones that knew. Well, me and our best friend, but she wasn't gonna tell anybody, and we didn't really get to talk after that because she was on vacation, and so we were the only ones in our little circle that knew. And so we did go out the next day and celebrate. So that kind of put our mind at ease. We went out, we went for a walk, we talked about everything. We started to get a little excited, even though we were like still in disbelief again. And then I remember we were actually out and we got the call that I was 5 weeks pregnant, and that the doctor reviewed everything and did say that the HCG levels were very good, and that he would say that I was like low risk for miscarriage as far as for problems with HCG and things like that. So, you know, it was still kind of scary, but it was good to hear that that came back good and that the pregnancy was confirmed and everything like that. And how did you feel on your end?
Well, definitely, like I said, like the 24 hours, those were like one of the longest 24 hours, because you know we're in, like you said, in celebratory mode. We really want this to be, you know, true and not as
like cautiously optimistic.
Yeah,
I guess
so
is where we were.
It was like I was, you know, excited. I you know, I didn't sleep much, but it was more like in the sleep, like in the exciting kind of sleep, because I didn't mind that if whether or not I went to work the next morning, because like I had to.
We didn't have work.
Was it?
No, it was summer. It was August.
Oh yeah, it
was
was summer.
Still on
So
vacation.
I was like, okay, let's just hope that, you know, that's it. You know, I'm ready to start a family, ideally, and you know, she played tug of war.
Just take off your tie, because she's not.
She wants to play tug of war. So
she wants to eat your tie.
So I was, you know, really excited at that point, because you know, we had been here for so long, and you know, like now we're about to open up the next chapter.
Right. And honestly, I didn't have pregnancy symptoms until about 6 weeks. And I think like my first trimester, honestly, guys, I just slept and ate. I slept, Sam cooked, and I ate. Like I slept and ate. That was it. And even though I had a pretty easy pregnancy, and I'll tell you one thing, like in the beginning, I didn't have morning sickness. I would get like nausea sometimes, but my main symptom in the first trimester was exhaustion, and like not normal exhaustion. This was next level exhaustion. I was always sleeping and eating, and that was it. And so in the beginning, before we found out her sex, we didn't really care if we had a girl or a boy, especially after everything we went through. Like, it didn't matter. The baby was healthy and the baby was here, and that was great. But I thought I was having a boy, and I'll tell you why. Because in my family, besides me, as far as I know, it's always been this myth, even though it's a old wives' tale, it's always been true, which is all the women in my family who have been pregnant with girls, they've been really sick. Their pregnancies have been really hard, super nauseous, a lot of morning sickness, a lot of like just a lot of symptoms like hitting them. And the people who have been pregnant with boys, they don't really have morning sickness and stuff like that. So like I didn't have morning sickness. I only threw up once, and it was like, I think in my second trimester, and it wasn't morning sickness. It was because when I was pregnant, I couldn't deal with the taste or smell of mint. And so when I would brush my teeth every morning, it has mint in it. And we looked for something that didn't have mint in it, and we couldn't find any good toothpaste. We couldn't find any good toothpaste that actually cleaned your teeth that didn't have any mint in it. And so I would basically suck it up every morning and just... And honestly, like about when we were like 8 weeks pregnant, 2 weeks after we found out, like around there, 2-3 weeks, we decided we didn't want to tell. I have a pretty big family. We have a pretty big family. And so we didn't want to tell like everyone right away. But we did want to tell like very close, intimate people. So we decided to tell my mom, Sam's mom. We told my close aunts, my grandmother, my close cousins, like our very close knit people. And once we told them, and once we got to celebrate with them, that kind of helped to put that like disbelief away and move forward with, well, we actually are pregnant and we can celebrate it. And now we had people to celebrate it with, even though there was still like a lot of family that didn't know because it was still early on and we weren't ready to share it, but we could celebrate with the main people. Like,
when we did tell our moms and, you know, the immediate family, that it's like now you have less doubt in your mind that you're dreaming, and that it's like, okay, it's reinforced, like, okay, this is real. And you know, like,
we got to celebrate. And then the ultrasound was another thing, because number one, I've heard a lot of other women say it, so it wasn't just us, but like they won't give you an ultrasound, or they won't really check you out until the earliest I've seen it for somebody who didn't have a miscarriage before is like 8 to 9 weeks, because from what I heard from the doctors, it's basically they can barely see anything anyway, and if something is gonna happen, there's really nothing they can do so early on, so they don't even really do it. And for me, I didn't get to have my first ultrasound. Well, we'll go back because there was a little scare, but my first ultrasound in our doctor's office and really like talking was 11 weeks, and that was because of the pandemic. So because of the pandemic and because of the amount of pregnancies during the pandemic, and just New York going through a surge, like because of all the pandemic complications is what I'm gonna call it, the appointments were so backed up, and so my first like appointment with my doctor was 11 weeks. And so we kind of went through the beginning of the pregnancy, and honestly my first trimester, some ups and downs, but overall I want to say that I had a pretty healthy pregnancy and a very good pregnancy. It was a very blessed time, and it was just like a very reflective time. It was a very blessed time. Anna and me are, well, she's 3 days, her birthday is 3 days after mine, and so like I got to welcome my daughter that I longed for so long 3 days after my 31st birthday. And so it was just a very blessed time, a very reflective time, and overall it was a very positive time, although like the pregnancy had its ups and downs, and I'm gonna get into that. So I just want to say that, because we didn't really focus on the negative, we did focus on the positive, but I want to tell our entire pregnancy journey. And so like he said, after we told our families, we were just in celebratory mode, and you know, we had our little bubble of people now that was keeping our secret, because we didn't want to tell the bigger, you know, all of my cousins and all. We weren't ready for that, but we had our little intimate bubble that we could celebrate with at that point. And then so that was around 8 weeks. So like those 8, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, we were just in celebratory mode, and everybody would call and check on us, and we were, you know, enjoying what we had longed for, and you know, talking to the belly even though it was super small, and just really enjoying our time. And around 10 weeks we did have a scare with her. So right after we hit 10 weeks, I remember the day very clearly. Actually, I think you were back at work, but you ended up having a day off. So he was back at work, but he ended up having a day off. Thank God. Like that would have been worse if I was home alone. So right after we hit 10 weeks, I want to say maybe like a few days after, like 2-3 days after, we were getting ready to go out for a walk and go to the park. and I was eating breakfast, and I went to the bathroom and I was bleeding. And honestly, they had told us that you can have light bleeding during the beginning of your pregnancy, and I had light bleeding before we found out we were pregnant, that I thought was just like my period coming, and then looking back I was like, oh, that was implantation spotting that we didn't know about. So I had that, but this wasn't that. This wasn't like super heavy, but it was definitely almost like if you were starting your period, and there were like clots in it and things like that. That might be TNI, but I'm just trying to share the details. So it wasn't what I thought was normal. It wasn't what the doctor had explained to me. And right then and there in that moment, I was pretty sure that we were miscarrying Anna. And so we got up and we rushed to the hospital. And you know, I went into the hospital, and honestly, my hospital was amazing. The ER staff was amazing when it came to this, because I'm not sure if because of COVID, Sam wasn't supposed to be with me, and if they broke protocol with that, I'm not sure. But I know in the beginning he went to go park the car, and I went in, and I went in and I told the nurse that I'm 10 weeks pregnant, I'm bleeding a little bit heavier than spotting, and they took me right in. And the head nurse in charge came, and she took my vitals, and you know, my vitals were a little all over the place because I was so anxious, but she knew that. She's like, obviously you are scared about what's happening with your pregnancy and stuff like that. And so they took me right in, and they let Sam come back, and then we were put in a private GYN room. So it's like the room that has the special table and stuff like that. And they came and they asked us all the questions, like when did the bleeding start, all these things. And honestly, it had stopped by then, but it had already been like, maybe from our hospitals wasn't that close to us, the hospital that we chose, because we weren't happy with the hospitals in our area. Whole other story. But anyway, we chose a hospital that is about 45 minutes away from us. And so by the time we realized this bleeding, calmed ourselves down, got ready, and got to the hospital and saw the doctor and everything, it was almost about an hour. So I was bleeding, and it was slowing down, but it didn't stop for about an hour. And then by the time they were actually doing the internal checks and everything, it was pretty much stopped. But then he did say, oh, you're still kind of spotting, but this is not what you described. And luckily I took pictures. So if anybody is pregnant and something like that happens, I know it's really hard in that moment to think about it. I actually didn't think about it at first because I was so panicked. But then in the last moment before we went to the hospital, I took pictures in the toilet. I took pictures on the camera because I remembered one of my friends saying that when she had a miscarriage, they had asked if she had any pictures or any physical evidence so that they could look at it and see what actually was going on or what happened. And so I had snapped a couple pictures right before we left. And so I had showed him the pictures. He examined me, they examined me, whatever. And they examined me, and then we had to wait a while in the room. But luckily it was a private room, so we were able to kind of be by ourselves in that moment of like chaos. And that was nice, because other hospitals I've heard horror stories when women are going through miscarriages or miscarriage scares. And
much like, you know, the waiting for those results from the pregnancy test, the blood test from the beginning of it, it's like now you're in here for something what you could think is potentially serious, and that, you know, every minute crawls by because you find yourself looking at your watch or wondering like, this could be the end of you potentially starting your family after waiting so long. And that was really hard, you know, like, and those results were like, could those results take any longer? Like,
right. And then also I had cramping in the beginning, like 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. Actually, I had cramping all the way up to like 20 weeks, but definitely like that first trimester, my cramping was pretty intense. And the way I've heard other women describe cramping before I got pregnant, like normal cramping was like, oh, it's like a twinge, and this was more than a twinge. So I had asked the doctor about that, and they told me, oh, some women can experience heavier cramping. As long as you don't experience heavy bleeding and stuff like that, it should be fine. And you know, and now I was bleeding, so I was thinking that we were miscarrying, or I was thinking because I hadn't got to get the first sonogram, I wasn't sure if it could have been like an ectopic pregnancy or something. So my mind was all over the place. And then when they came in, they did a lot of tests, blood tests, vital tests. They gave me a IV for liquids, and they did a pelvic exam. They touched my stomach area as well, like my uterus. They did some other tests with like my uterus, like touching it, I think, because your uterus obviously feels different when you're pregnant versus when you're not. And he told me like everything feels okay, but just to be sure, we're going to get an ultrasound to see what happened inside, like, because you know the bleeding was there and I was still spotting. And I went downstairs and we went to the ultrasound tech, and you weren't allowed in there, so you just had to wait, right? And I went to the ultrasound tech, and if you guys ever had an ultrasound with an ultrasound tech, like not a pregnancy one in your doctor, like not the routine ones, but an ultrasound for something else, or in the emergency room, they can't really tell you anything. The ultrasound tech just looks and asks the doctor, but they're not really allowed to tell you anything. And I kind of hate that, because it's like it gives you more anxiety to just watch this person and try to read their face, but they can't tell you anything.
And like when they turn the monitor, like you're not.
No, she didn't even put the monitor anywhere close to me. Like the monitor was so far away from me. And they actually told me when I went in that room that they had to do a regular ultrasound. She was going to do a regular ultrasound and a transvaginal, which is where they it's like a big probe, and it goes inside, and it's supposed to be able to see more, like more in depth. So she told me that they were going to do both originally. And then when I went in, and I was by myself and just trying to stay calm, she did the ultrasound and she took a lot of pictures. It was a pretty long ultrasound, but I couldn't see because, again, it was the ER. They didn't know what it could have been, and so they don't show you. And so it was a pretty long ultrasound, though. I want to say I was in there for a good 20 minutes, and she was snapping a lot of pictures. And then she told me, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to show the doctor these pictures. And based on what he tells me, I'm going to see if you even need the transvaginal. So I wasn't really sure. She's still hungry?
Maybe.
I wasn't really sure how to feel about that, because I was like, is she saying that because it's something good and I don't need the transvaginal? Or is she saying that because she's already seeing what it is and it is what it is? I wasn't sure how to feel about that. So I was just basically praying in that moment. And then she came back and she said, well, the doctor wants me to take a couple more pictures just on the regular ultrasound. And I was like, okay. So then she did that and went back and showed the doctor. And she came back and she said, you're going to have to speak to the doctor, but we don't have to do the transvaginal. And I thought that probably meant that there was no heartbeat or there was something wrong, and she saw it and there was no need for the transvaginal.
It's like, can you not make it sound so cryptic? Like,
well, the thing is that they legally are not allowed to tell. They legally
I get that.
Because they're not medical doctors. They are trained, but honestly, I just took it like, I don't know. That was a really hard experience, because after everything we've been through, and we were already, you know, anytime you go through a first pregnancy, but especially when you go through infertility, I think it's so fragile and you're so afraid of something happening finally after everything. So I really in that moment thought that I had started to get some cramping at that point too. And so part of me was like, oh my God, it's an ectopic pregnancy and I'm gonna need surgery and this is gonna be like really horrible. But I was also trying to stay calm, and I didn't really know. So I was kind of like, let's just see what the doctor says. We went back in the room and we waited for a while again. It could have been a few minutes, but to us it felt forever. And they came back and they told us that the baby's heart rate was normal, movement was great, growth was great, and that the bleeding was from something called a I always forget how to say it. No, I'm gonna say it. I remember how to say it. It's called a subchorionic hematoma. And basically, there's two types from what the doctor explained to me. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm just sharing my experience. If this happens to you, or if you suspect it happens to you, go to your own doctor. But I'm just explaining what the doctor explained to me about my situation. So there's two types. One type can be dangerous because so basically it's when the baby implants and the placenta grows. The baby implants, and when the baby implants, they bury themselves in your uterus in order to really like get in there and grow. And that creates like a little bruise because it's like an impact when they bury themselves, and it creates a bruise, and that bruise is bleeding and it will heal over time. But if it happens on the umbilical cord or anywhere near the umbilical cord, it can be dangerous because as it bleeds and grows, it can cause a miscarriage. But there's another type where it's more on the uterine wall and not anything really to do with the pregnancy, and it's just causing superficial bleeding, which is the one I had. And so he told me, it's no harm to the baby's fine, heart rate's fine, baby looks great, super active. They didn't show me the ultrasound, but when they came back and reported, they said she was super hyper. Well, not she, because they didn't know she was a girl back then, but said baby was super hyper and everything. And that it did, I felt super blessed in that moment, and it was great news that everything was okay. And I never really heard about that, so I didn't know that was something that we should have looked out for. Ultimately, I researched it after. I spoke to other pregnant women after in our support groups, and actually it's more common than you think, but nobody ever warned me about it. So
just when you think you're prepared with like as much information as possible, life is gonna throw something at you. They're like, oh wait, I never heard of that.
I pretty much saw it before I was pregnant, before I had that experience. I thought that spotting was normal, but anything other than that was a definite, like, you're losing the baby in some sense. And while that may be true for some, like, there are apparently a lot of things that can cause heavier than normal bleeding, and I didn't really know about that. So I didn't even know that there was hope, so to speak. But thank God everything was okay. That was the only time that happened. We didn't experience bleeding throughout the pregnancy after that. It was pretty much fine. Abnormal bleeding. It was just that one episode, and it stopped after like a day. I was spotting after, and then after like a day, it completely stopped. It was scary for like 2-3 weeks after that. I really was scared that something was gonna happen again. I was always scared that I was gonna bleed again. I was scared that maybe the doctors were wrong and maybe it was more dangerous than they were letting on. But luckily, then after that, like 2 weeks after that, I was finally going to our actual doctor and getting an actual first pregnancy appointment. And she saw the notes from the subchorionic hematoma, and she talked to me about it, and she was able to look at it, and she said, yeah, it's still there, but it's healing. And during that first pregnancy, we were able to. They couldn't do like a full ultrasound. They couldn't do a full ultrasound, but they did what they called a table ultrasound. Unfortunately, because during the time of my first trimester, Sam couldn't be at any of my appointments because of COVID. It got better throughout the second trimester, and then we went through a surge and it got worse. So our pregnancy, like, it was up and down whether or not he could be in the appointment. So that was annoying, disheartening, anxiety inducing. Like, it added to a lot of stuff that to me was a little unnecessary at times, but I don't know, it was. So the first appointment, he wasn't at it, but I would always make sure to take pictures and be as detailed as I could. And so the first one, she did the table ultrasound, which is a smaller machine. It doesn't show as much, but it does give you a picture if the baby is alive, growing, healthy. And so she did that because of the subchorionic hematoma. I don't think she was gonna do it. I think she was just gonna do the general stuff that they do at the beginning, which is just a pap smear, general check, how are you feeling, vitals, all of that. But she did the table just, I guess, to be sure, and we were able to see Anna, and she actually looked directly at the camera, which is crazy. I've never seen a baby do that so young in an ultrasound in my life.
Yep, and we still have that picture stored in the closet, like, memories.
We have it a few different places, but and then so every appointment that Sam couldn't go to because of COVID. Yeah, baby. Couldn't go to because of COVID. Afterwards, we would, on the drive home, I would show him all the pictures, tell him everything that happened and all of that. So your first time seeing that ultrasound wasn't actually in the ultrasound room, but you can say how you felt. Come, baby.
I felt like very happy and elated that, you know, things were okay. And once I saw that ultrasound like image, it was very heartwarming because
she was tiny,
she
but
was
she scared
really
right out of
small. I think she was.
That was 11 weeks.
11 centimeters. Like she was really small. Like you would think like, whoa.
I think they say the size of a jelly bean at that point.
Yeah, like she was really small, and the fact that
but
she
super hyper already, guys.
Yeah.
Like she was always hyper, even when she was like a little embryo. The embryo could move around, okay, because she was super hyper from the beginning. Even though I couldn't feel it, in that point of pregnancy you can't feel it, but every time they would do an ultrasound, they would be like, oh my god, this baby's so hyper, and you know, she would be all over the place, which she still is.
Yeah,
so it's great.
So like when I saw the image and I could kind of gauge like the rest of it, but did you take a video of the table?
No, you're not allowed to.
Well, anyway, so
I wanted to.
Basically, like she caught like the table ultrasound literally caught.
Oh no! Wait,
look like
that's
them
wrong. That's wrong.
catching what?
She did let me take a video. She said it was against protocol, but since it was me and her in the room, she did let me take a video. But then after that, I couldn't because other doctors were like,
right. So literally, like as she moved the thing, I don't know what it's called. I don't want to say probe, but basically over where Anna was, she literally looked at the camera like,
yeah,
hello.
I'll insert the picture.
Like literally, like,
yeah,
hi. I was like, what?
So I never seen an ultrasound like that early on, like you guys can tell me, but honestly I'd never seen a baby do that before. And then she also did the Doppler with the heartbeat. Yes. So you were able to hear that. We recorded that. I think I recorded that. Yeah, I recorded that. And so from then on we saw her, and it was really real, and it was the end of our first trimester. That scare had, you know, even though it scared us and we were still in the back of our head, you know, we were ending the first trimester and we were ending it healthy. And so it was good. It was a good feeling to end that 12-week mark of like where people are considered higher risk for miscarriage and things like that, and to be told that the baby was healthy and to actually see her in an ultrasound even though she was super tiny. And it was just a really good time.